Hello everyone and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. Next to literary fiction, horror and thrillers, Ki Longfellow also published 4 murder mysteries featuring Staten Island Private Eye, Sam Russo. 3 of them I read in 2013 and the 4th in 2016. Sam's adventures take place in or around 1948 in a noir setting from detective movies with actors like Humphrey Bogart and Jim Cagney. Sam constantly compares himself with Bogey and talks in the same kind of fast wisecrack way. Here are my abbreviated written reading experiences. Shadow Role is Russo's first case as a PI. Before that, he acted as the brains and sidekick of Lino Morelli, a detective with the Staten Island Police. Sam and Lino grew up together in a New York orphanage. Sam investigates the death of 3 horse jockeys in Saratoga Springs. Murder around a popular racetrack where big money is involved can only do harm for business. So many people want him to report all 3 instances as an accident. It is almost as if the murder cases are merely an excuse for Ki Longfellow to portray Sam and his surroundings. She displays quite an extensive knowledge of the history of horse racing and of movies. As for the solving of the mystery, Russo conducts a rather happenstance way of going about it. Most of the time it looks like he doesn't know himself what he's doing. He simply rolls with whatever punches are thrown at him. Of course, he miraculously solves the mystery in the end, although not entirely in the conventional way, where the bad guys are exposed and escorted to jail. But I'll leave that to the reader. Shadow Role is written with obvious craftsmanship, and it is packed with hilarious language and wisecracks. For instance, Sam introduces himself like this. Sam Russo, born anytime, raised anywhere, pain in the ass. The lady of the orphanage in which he grew up, Florence Zawatsky, or Flo, is described as, "Old Flo knew as much about mothering as a cow knew about driving a cab." Or someone with bad eyesight is characterized as, "Hank couldn't see the Titanic without his glasses." The beautiful and rich Mrs. Willingford tries to seduce Sam. Sitting opposite her, trying to do the sensible thing, he realizes, "My brains were still down around my groin somewhere." Did I think Mrs. Willingford was a killer? Certainly, but not the kind that left dead bodies, just dead hearts. Shadow Role made me laugh out loud many times. Here's the introduction of Jane, the dog of Babe Duffy, one of the victims. Jane was some sort of hunting dog from Africa. I figured Babe named her Jane because it was the only African word he knew, as in, me Tarzan, you Jane. The animal companionship between Jane and Sam becomes one of the most beautiful storylines in the series. Next to being very funny, Longfellow's pen is most sharp when she lets Sam reminisce about his war experiences. He served in the cavalry in the Philippines, fighting guns and cannons with horses. This he describes somewhere as a crash course in scraping the bottom of human nature. But the diamond in the rough, Sam Russo, is not all jokes and wittiness. As a kid, he dreamed of being a jockey, but his heavy build made that impossible. I would have loved that, being a jockey. But life doesn't work that way, getting what you love. Seemed to me life gives you what you need. The second Sam Russo murder mystery, Good Dog, Bad Dog, picks up where the first book ended. In Shadow Role, Jane, Sam's dog, was almost murdered. She was stabbed many times by a knife but miraculously survived. Sam describes her. Jane would always look like she'd tripped over the railing of the Central Park Zoo's croc exhibit. His friend with the Staten Island Police, Lino Morelli, calls for his aid when a corpse is washed ashore. It's obvious that this person has been murdered. Although Sam is still recovering from the physical and emotional wounds of his first adventure, he decides to take on the assignment. The clothing of the victim, a huge man, leads Sam to the world of theatre. Like in the first book, our PI and his yodeling dog Jane more or less roll with the punches. The trail leads them to the 48th Street Theatre in New York. Here Sam is confronted with a second murder. This victim had played the same role in a play as the first poor fellow. Sam has some suspicions about who the killer might be, but he never speaks it out loud. The finale leads to an unexpected climax, after which it remains unclear whether Sam beforehand knew how events would turn out or if he didn't have a clue. Again, I got the distinct feeling that the book isn't really about solving a murder case. It's mainly a feast of language, humour, cynicism, and of turning the world upside down. This last is, for instance, illustrated by Holly, one of Sam's neighbours on Staten Island. I still hadn't figured Holly. He could be a woman. She could be a man. I didn't worry about it at all. I liked Holly. Even though the book is a page-turner, packed with action and mystery, there is more to it than meets the eye. Sam's cynicism has a background that is gradually unfolded with, at its core, his childhood in a horror house orphanage and his experiences in the war. I enjoyed it immensely. The girl in the next room is yet another exposé of Sam's out-of-placeness in a mystery novel. The mystery behind the murder in this book is pretty straightforward. It is almost as if the murders are not what these stories are really about. Sam still dreams of being Humphrey Bogey, or any detective actor of that era, but each time he has to admit that he is just himself. And every time he discovers this, he seems to be okay with it, as he seems to be okay with virtually everything. Sam is very fond of Holly, his lovely neighbour, who's working in the streets and who in real life is not a woman at all. Or in Sam's wisecrack language, she was hung like Flynn. This mix-up in gender doesn't bother Sam the least. It simply is no issue at all. Sam's respect for all people and things out of place is borderless, except when murder is involved. One of the themes in these stories is that creatures can be themselves, no matter what society says or thinks or does about it. The dog Jane is a good example. She is a rare African breed and she doesn't bark, but she yodels. Sam is convinced that she talks in what he calls Egyptian, and that she has more intelligence than most of the humans he reluctantly has to deal with. One day soon, I expected her to speak perfect English, take up knitting, and use the telephone. Anyway, Jane is in some subtle way out of place as well, but happy to be who she is, not questioning any of it. And she and Sam are an item. Jane hated rain, I loved rain. It was the only thing we argued about. Same thing goes for Mrs. Willingford, married to the filthy rich Joker Willingford, but devoted to Sam in many different ways. She's tough, knows exactly what she wants and spares no expense to get what she wants, or give to whom she wants to give. At some point in this story, she tells that she, as a 4-year-old, saw how her drunken father beat her drunken mother to death. This shocks Sam. First, because Lois, as he sometimes is allowed to call her, never shows her true inner feelings or her background, and second, because he is not sure if she tells the truth. Either way, Mrs. Willingford was a woman who'd invented herself, just as Holly had invented herself. This is the best compliment anyone can receive from Sam. In this third murder case, the inner crowd of characters is hunting down a bunch of murderous freaks who gather as de Kaars en Bloed Consortium. The name is Dutch for the Candle and Blood Society. Every now and then they pick up 3 hookers in an extravagant car, a Lagonda. In a faraway house they have their way with them, after which they matter-of-factly murder them. Holly miraculously escaped her own murder, and anyone who touches Holly or Jane, or Mrs. Willingford for that matter, has to answer to Sam. Just as in the other cases, it is a matter of running along with what happens to Sam. When he finds the house of this sick consortium, he makes mistake upon mistake and goes in without any real plan. It is simply a delight for this reader to be in the company of Sam Russo and his tolerant inner crowd for the duration of some 280 pages. The final Sam Russo story, Dead on the Rocks, is my least favorite, although it was awesome to hang out again with Sam, Mrs. Willingford, Holly and Jane. During a trip on the luxurious yacht of Joker Willingford, someone jumps overboard and 2 people are murdered. The plot unfolds like an Agatha Christie, with all the players coming together at the end and Sam unmasking the culprit of so much bloodiness. In this story, Sam Russo is a less atypical PI within a well-put-together plot. As a PI, it is Sam's job to ask questions, although he himself doubts the usefulness of doing so. I needed to ask questions, and I wanted them answered. I wasn't a complete idiot. I knew life wasn't like that. Straight questions followed by straight answers, but something in me made me try. If you love murder mysteries that don't always tread the traditional paths, you should definitely check out Ki Longfellow's Sam Russo books. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.